There are a couple of things. Where we are just now is that Ms Gribben is being cross-examined by Mr Ferguson. I think, Mr Ferguson, you've got a few more questions, haven't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I thought I'd discuss now to give everybody time to think about them. The first thing is, after having heard what I've heard so far, I would like to carry out an inspection of the building. And so far we've explored, as far as we could, trying to understand the interior of people's homes without the need for any intrusion on my part. And Mrs Ferguson has very kindly given me some photographs of the interior of our flat, but not, I think, well, Mr Farrell and Miss Macmillan haven't so far done that, or nor Miss Fullerton. I do need to see these in some way, so I need that, either that footage, or I could pop in, if you can let me get access. Now, it seems to me that, given the current circumstances where levels of infection are declining, that I could have an accompanied inspection of the fabric of the building. And I'd certainly like to see the common parts right up to the roof and all the other common parts. And I would like a walk round. And if possible, I'm a little unclear about what the situation is with the flats at the top of the building. Are they council flats, or no, I'm a bit hazy about where everybody is in the block. Oh, you're on the top, Mrs Ferguson. Right.
Yes, I'm on the top as well.
Right. Are there other flats on the top as well as your own? Four on the floor. So there are others. Well, I'd like to see at least inside the other flats if they're untenanted.
Yes, they're empty.
Right. Okay. Now, when I talk about an accompanied site inspection, that means that I would have somebody from either side, at least one person from either side, as I do my inspection. And on paper, all four of you would be entitled to accompany me, but I think it would be better if you wouldn't mind appointing a representative from the group of four objectors who could be the objectors' representative, because that would mean it was just me, our representative from the council. I'll leave it to you to decide who the best person would be, and our representative from the objectors group. So that's three people. A lot easier to keep social distancing and generally not create a crowd. So I wondered how you thought about that, objectors. Any feelings on it? Do you want to think about it and talk among yourselves for a while?
Yes, that'll be fine. We'll do that.
We'll chat.
Talk about
the
it.
next thing to decide would be when that could most conveniently take place. And I'll need a bit of arrangement and diary clearing. So I'll leave that. I think perhaps if we come back round to that maybe tomorrow, if people would think about that and tomorrow. And we'll discuss it after the end of the objector's evidence, the end of Mr Miller's evidence, I should say. Now, the next thing, Callum, could you take us into private session for me? That didn't take long. It takes longer to switch it off, but that's a long switch on. Right. Okay. These matters having been at least talked about, let's resume Ms Gribben's questioning. So, Mr Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mum. Good morning, Ms Gribben. Just like to pick up where we left off yesterday, after paragraph 3 of your precognition. So if you can just draw your attention to paragraph 3.2, which states the council discussed the option of being offered social rented accommodation in the area with Malcolm and Julie, however both declined the offer. I won't read that whole paragraph out, 'cause you have it in front of you. However, what I'd like to address is a portion of the text in brackets there which states, shared equity is a form of discounted home ownership where the owner purchases a stake in the property while the council holds the remaining share. However, the whole of the legal title is held by the owner. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, if I can just draw your attention to another document, which is EDC 99. EDC 99 is Eastern Berkshire Council's shared equity homes for sale administrative procedures document.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Sorry, I'll just need to find it. I'm actually seem to be locked out of my PC. Sorry, if you continue.
Would Miss Hamilton maybe be able to assist just with a copy of that document, or someone else, just so that Miss Scriven has it in front of her?
Okay.
Okay. So, in section 1 of that document, introduction, paragraph 1.6, it reads, a shared equity owner is not permitted to sublet the property or any part of it without the council's written permission. Approval will not normally be granted unless there are exceptional circumstances, and if granted, will be time limited. Given that, and your recognition, you state that in the event of accepting a shared equity agreement, the whole of the legal title is held by the owner. Why does this administrative document suggest that owners who accepted such an agreement would then have their existing legal rights, i.e. to let their property to whomever they see fit, diminished by accepting that?
The shared equity scheme is largely based on the Scottish Government shared equity scheme, so we follow that basis.
Yeah. So the Scottish Government shared equity scheme, which I've kind of discussed already, the council does what it wants and it really kind of gains its funding from the Scottish Government. So as a decision-making body, I've already been informed that it's not quite the case. But even taking that as a guidance document, then I believe it's EDC 100, the Scottish Government's new supply shared equity scheme administrative procedures. Is that correct? Is that the document you're referring to?
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting into the system. Sorry, I think it just needs reset. I think it's okay.
Oh, is it your Windows?
Yeah.
Ah, you got that option. That's cool. Just take your time on it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, in response to Ms. Scriven. It appears to be, that's just what I'm trying to clarify, EDC 100, ma'am. Yeah.
Sorry, which document were you referring to? 100. Okay.
Yeah. So, is that in front of you now? Yeah. We all happy to proceed? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, just to clarify, Ms. Cribben, when you state that this document is derived more or less from the Scottish Government document, is this the document that you're referring to? That is EDC 100?
It's based on the Scottish Government scheme, and we've adapted our own scheme.
So you've adapted it from this document, EDC 100?
Yes, I would imagine it would be.
So, just, if you would you be able to tell me where in the Scottish Government scheme a similar clause relating to owners who outrightly own the title for their property not having the right, which they would presumably have, not in such an agreement, to sublet their property, that's mentioned in the Scottish Government's scheme from which you've derived it?
Mr Ferguson, again, it's a very big question, and if the witness, it's always hard to find something when you're in the witness box. Can I direct you perhaps to paragraph 114 of EDC 100? If just in the hope that that will shorten the question a little, that's all.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Is that page 102? That'll be correct. Governing law, I can see there. No. 7.
1.4. I'm sorry if that's not the right place, but I think it seems to me to be.
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah,
reference you were looking for?
That's very helpful, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Will we let Ms Gribben comment on it then?
Yeah, please.
Would you have that paragraph, Ms Gribben?
Yes.
Carry on.
I think that this paragraph sort of explains your... Does that not answer your question?
Yeah, just if you would you be able to kind of explain which parts of the policy which you've just said are derived from this document are derived from this paragraph?
Well, to me, that paragraph explains our policy.
Sorry, I'm just asking what exactly is derived from this paragraph that's in section 1.6 of Eastern Berkshire Council's document.
The explanation which Ms Gribben gives in her recognition, your question was about 1.6 of the council scheme, and I can see a correlation between the three. I'm genuinely not sure what further light you expect Ms Gribben to shed on it.
Thank you, ma'am. So, yeah, Ms Gribben, in your opinion, given that owner-occupiers presently hold the legal titles to their property and under the shared equity agreement states that the whole of the legal title is held by the owner, that would appear to me that it would confer the same property rights, would it not?
Yeah, the owner does have full property rights, yes.
So, if they wished to let their property to whomever they saw fit, why would they need to request permission to do that?
The purpose of shared equity is to help people go onto the housing market, to help people in housing need buy their own home. Potentially, if you're subletting, you're acting as a private landlord and you're making a profit from it, which goes against the principle of shared equity.
So, essentially what you're saying is that for that particular reason, they would not have the same rights?
There's some limited rights. The council has a share in the property. The property is discounted. The purchaser buys the property for a discounted rate, and the council basically acts as a silent partner and holds the remaining stake. So we do have an interest in the property.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms Gribben. So, yeah, just kind of final point on that before we move on. You stated there they would have limited rights, as in their rights compared to what they have at the moment would be reduced were they to accept this agreement. Is that correct?
Well, for example, for subletting, then yes.
Yeah. And would there be any other ways in which the rights were?
To be honest, I'm not a legal. I'm not. I would need legal advice on that. I couldn't answer that just now.
Okay, thank you. If we could just move on to section 4 of your recognition, that's response to criticisms by objectors. In paragraph 4.1, you state that several of the objectors have made criticisms of the Council's approach to engagement, suggesting that they felt bullied or that strong-arm tactics are used. While I recognise that the compulsory purchase process is stressful and upsetting for anyone affected by it, I do not consider these criticisms are justified. When we spoke yesterday, I think it was quite apparent that you did not engage with all affected parties.
That's right. Yes.
So why would a criticism suggesting to the Council's approach to engagement be unjustified in your opinion, as it's stated in your recognition?
With exception to yourself, where we spoke yesterday of how the Council had made an error and you and your sister weren't included with the engagement for which we discussed yesterday, then we did engage with the remaining owners.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, Ms. Scriven. I'm just like to ask why you do not consider that those criticisms are justified. That's to say, those criticisms regarding the Council's approach to engagement, which...
I think Ms Scribbins answered the point.
Okay, ma'am.
And she did make her position clear yesterday. She acknowledged freely that you and your sister should have been involved, and she apologised for that. I mean, I don't think, and I absolutely have the point, but I don't think there's a real need to revisit it. Have you a new point to add to it, though?
Simply just trying to get to the bottom of why Ms Scriven does not consider that those criticisms are justified when she has apologised for them. Because one would surely only apologise where a justified criticism.
I think, I have to say, I think you're labouring the point. Ms Scriven was completely open about her position. I don't think there's a need to kick her while she's down, so to speak. I don't think unless you have a new point to bring up about that.
Not regarding that, ma'am. I'll move on. Thank you.
Well, it may or may not be, Ms Hamilton, but I'll read it. I'll take the wording of exactly what it says. Sorry, Mr Ferguson, do you want to move on to your next question?
Yes, ma'am. So in that same paragraph 4.1, the term strong-arm tactics were used. What is it you mean by strong-arm tactics?
It was my understanding that some owners felt that the Council had used strong-arm tactics through engagement.
And would that, for example, consist of coercive practice that forced them into making a particular decision?
I'm not sure of the detail.
And then paragraph 4.2 of your recognition states that the Council approached owners in a sensitive manner. Do you believe that to be the case? Yes,
we were fully aware that obviously it was a sensitive issue. It was quite an emotional subject for owners, so yes, I do feel that we did approach in a sensitive manner.
Yeah. However, and again, I don't want to do this to death, but that was just the owners. That was not the affected parties who were approached in a sensitive manner.
Yeah, that's right.
So there were individuals in this process, including myself and my sister, who were not regarded in a sensitive manner by the Council's actions.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. In section 5 of your recognition, which is conclusions, paragraph 5.1 states that I consider that reasonable attempts were made by the Council to engage with the owners of the CPO properties to discuss the Council's proposals and try to buy the CPO properties voluntarily, but without success. The word reasonable here is what I'd take issue with. Would you be able to explain to me what you define as reasonable, in your opinion?
Well, we had several meetings with owners, collectively and individually. We spoke about the options fully, all options. We advised that council had taken a decision to progress with option 4, and our role was to negotiate with owners about trying to purchase the properties from them. I feel that we did that in a reasonable manner.
Okay. So, by reasonable then, it's the comprehensive nature of the attempts that made them reasonable, and that you're saying you fully discussed the options with the affected
we
parties.
discussed the options at the initial meeting, which took place in Mrs Macmillan's home. After that, it was actually council who decided to progress with option 4, and council asked officers to work with owners to work towards potentially buying the properties from them. So the remaining meetings with owners was really to try to progress the purchase.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I mean I think that's corroborated in paragraph 5.2 of your own recognition there. I don't think that's up for debate. But in paragraph 5.3, it states that offers have been made over and above market value, and proper consideration has been given to ongoing housing requirements and an appropriate housing rehousing package offered. I'm not really interested in discussing compensation here, but just on the nature of that statement, as it sits, that offers have been made over and above market value. Would you say that that valuation process, as it relates to the compulsory purchase now, and is mentioned in your own precognition in paragraph 2.4, that you have enough data to suggest that the offers made are over and above market value? Because I don't believe that to be the case.
Well, there was 2 independent valuations carried out by chartered surveyors who gave those valuations.
And is 2 valuations a typical industry standard for a project of this nature? Would you not perhaps seek further valuations to clarify that was correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Ferguson, and I do understand any frustration you might feel, but that's us into compensation, and you know what my position is on that.
Ma'am, thank you.
It just can't be productively discussed. You will have an opportunity, as will Mrs. Ferguson, to give your opinions, and that will help me evaluate impact. But you can't lead me into a situation where I have to take any view on adequacy of compensation or otherwise.
No, absolutely, ma'am. I'll move on. Thank you. Ms. Cribben, if I could just ask you now about document EDC 43. This is a report authored by your colleague, Mr. Brodie, relating to the proposed development of the site at Nithsdale Crescent, and it sort of includes discussion of the options of that. Have you seen this document? 4.3. Okay. So, in that document, section 5, management of risks, risks and control measures relating to the report as follows. Paragraph 5.1 of that section states reputational risk. A protracted and contentious CPO process has the potential to have a negative impact on council reputation. Would you agree with that statement? Yeah. Yeah. And just in terms of quantifying that risk, what reputationally, insofar as you're able to see, would be the risk of a CPO process on the council's reputation?
I would imagine a CPO is seen in rather a negative light. We would always prefer to negotiate and come to an agreement with owners on any purchase. And
yeah, obviously to mitigate that, seeking to purchase through negotiation is listed there as something to do with that. Just not to labour this point too much, but would you accept that there's a reputational risk to the Scottish ministers in the event that they confirm this CPO that could be derived from the risk to the council's own reputation? And
Mr. Ferguson, obviously I've got all the respect for Ms. Gribben as a local government officer doing a difficult job, but I'm not interested in her opinion on the potential reputational effect on Scottish ministers as to the CPO. It isn't helpful.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. In section 4 of the same document, it's titled Implications, paragraph 4.1 states that frontline service to customers, tenants and other customers receive continuously improving services. Would you say from what you've seen in your time working at Eastern Berkshire Council that tenants and other customers at Nithsdale Crescent have received continuously improving services?
I can't comment on that. I don't work in housing management, so I don't overly deal with tenants at Nithsdale Crescent.
Just generally speaking, you've worked within the housing service for 24 years, is that right? Yeah, and is that the housing service at Eastern Berkshire Council?
Yes.
Yeah. So, again, within that time period, you surely must have been aware of the site at Nithsdale Crescent?
Not until recently, no.
No. Would you be able to tell me when you did become aware of it?
Really just at the start of this process.
So would that be the CPO process or the process of your engagement with it prior to the CPO that you became aware of Nithsdale Crescent?
I think it's back in 2018 when we started engaging with owners.
Yeah, so that's at the start of the engagement process?
Yeah.
And would that be kind of first quarter, second quarter 2018?
It would have been, it was early 2018.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean,
first quarter.
Yeah, since early 2018, I'd be quite happy to say there's been no service improvement, but I'd just like to see if you have anything to offer to the contrary to that. We've already heard from Mr. Brodie, and we're aware that perhaps Mr. Miller might be able to provide some more information on that. But it seems to me that there has been no continuous service improvement as described here.
I can't comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, I think your line of questioning may be sort of slightly misdirected in that as I read this document, and we know about how elected members would interpret it, because we've heard from some evidence from Mr. Brodie on it, it seems to me to be advising members on the implications, if you like, for future services. I think that's what the wording means. Obviously, your question is really about past services, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to draw out here, ma'am. So essentially, this advisement that, as you correctly know, would have advised decision makers, that is councillors, of these future expected improvements or continuous improvements to service under the implications of a CPO that was as early as 2018, roughly when Ms. Gribben began the engagement process for the council, or was working within that particular area of responsibility. That to me signals a clear intent as early as 2018, before a compulsory purchase order was in fact promoted, that this was the preferred option.
Well, that's a rather different point. I was just highlighting that this phrase, which you're asking Ms. Gribben about, should probably be regarded as an indication from officers to elected members that they think this will result in continuously improving services. So it's a future projection. And I was only making it clear to you that it wasn't helpful to try and take that point and extrapolate it backwards. But if you have another point to put to Ms. Brodie about the level of service, bearing in mind the strictures I've expressed a number of times, then that would be an allowable question.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. As you say, I think there would be more appropriate sense for that, so I'll leave that there. Thank you. Ms. Scriven, really, just the last thing, I suppose, that's significant that I'd like to ask you on kind of relation to your recognition is that there seems to be, to me, a general theme here of you suggesting that there's been some form of sensitive, careful engagement with owners, is obviously the particular wording, and as you've already acknowledged, not so much the case with the other affected parties. What have you, in your role as the council's engagement lead, as it were, or working with the engagement lead, it's the development advisor, what have you done since becoming aware of these mistakes to correct them?
Just to be precise, Mr. Ferguson, are you meaning about the failure to engage with yourself and Miss Ferguson? Yeah,
precisely, ma'am. Sorry, just to narrow that down, have there been any efforts made to engage with Miss Afton Ferguson?
No, not that I'm aware of.
No. And had I not made objections, which I was not notified by Eastern Berkshire Council that I was allowed to do, despite presumably having been known to them, being on their open electoral register, were there any efforts made to engage with myself by you or any other people that you're aware of at Eastern Berkshire Council?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Scriven, have you been involved in any other development processes, engaging with residents in Eastern Berkshire Council recently, anywhere? And that could be Kirkintilloch, Bishop Briggs, for example.
I work with the development advisor in new build provisions, so there are a few developments that are ongoing, particularly in Kirkintilloch. And as I say, I work with the development advisor.
Again, in line with the Scottish Government's strategic directives, or priorities, rather. Would you be able to just give me, in your knowledge of the area, what the most demanded area is for affordable housing? Yeah, and do you know roughly what the demand for Bearsden is as a proportion of the whole?
Well, as part of our strategic housing investment plan, our SHIP, we carry out analysis of housing need and demand in the area based on housing list figures. And the 2020 SHIP indicated that housing need and demand for Bearsden was 37%, so over a third. And
thank you for that, Ms. Scriven. And for, as you correctly say, it's 37% in 2020. Are you aware of what it was in 2019?
Not offhand, but it was high. I can look at the previous SHIP.
Yeah, I can say that it was also 37%. So basically, the point I'm getting at is, from that, it's clear to me, and I just want to see what your thoughts on it are. There has been no increase in the demand for affordable housing in Bearsden from 2019 to 2020. From
those figures, if it was to 37% in 2019, then no, but over a third is really quite high. Of all the areas in Eastern Berkshire, over a third of applicants need or would like to live in Bearsden.
Yeah. What would, in your opinion, be the key affordability issue in Eastern Berkshire?
it's a desirable place to live. There's good schools for kids. The issues are people want to live here. There's about 2,500 people on our housing list. Obviously, with high house prices in Eastern Bartonshire, particularly in Bearsden and Mulgai, affordability is an issue.
Yep. Thank you for that. So, yeah, affordability is a problem, and Eastern Bartonshire Council notes that the key affordability issue in Eastern Bartonshire Council, in their housing context, that the key issue continues to be high house prices. What I'd really like to get at here is that affordable housing is quite a loose term, wouldn't you say?
Ma'am, I'm not sure where this is going in terms of the scope of Mr. Ferguson's objection.
Yep.
Well, I have been thinking about how I could ensure that ministers were aware of the underlying reality of the impact, the financial impact on the objectors, so to speak, without going into areas that I may not go into, because there is an underlying reality, and it is a factor that I consider to be relevant, and if it were to be excluded, members would be in danger of taking a decision that would potentially have a significant area excluded. So I think it is reasonable for me to hear evidence about this under the caveat of knowing what I cannot go into. But I think it's reasonable for me to consider evidence about it. I don't particularly mind that it's coming from Mr. Ferguson. I think Mr. Ferguson's linkage with his mother's position is something I should take into account. So I'm not stopping Mr. Ferguson from pursuing it. So I'm not disallowing your line of questioning, Mr. Ferguson, but if you would mind how you go.
Yes, ma'am. I will do. Thanks. Yeah, just to really get to the point on that, then, Ms. Gribben, and clear this up. What does affordable housing mean to you, or any definition that you're aware of, given that there's such a demand for it in Bearsden?
Actually, sorry to stop you again. Mr. Ferguson, it's just that we're again going into an area that's regrettably much travelled in other places. Yep. There is an official definition of affordable housing. I'll let Ms. Gribben say what she considers affordable housing to be, but sort of for your own information, it is a term that is, if you like, officially defined, not only from in government circles, but also actually usually in the various housing planning documents and planning documents that every council presents. And it's much debated. So I don't want to waste inquiry time engaging in that debate. But I'm quite happy to have Ms. Gribben tell us what she believes affordable housing to mean in her day-to-day work.
I would say that affordable housing is when a tenant or owner pays less than the market value of the property or market rent. So there's different types of affordable housing. There's sort of different tenures. You've got social rent. You've got mid-market rent, which is another type, which is a type of intermediate housing. You've got shared ownership and shared equity. Those are the main types of affordable housing, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. So yeah, in terms of affordability, the average house price in Eastern Bartonshire in 2019 was £253,890. Also in 2019, the average salary in Eastern Bartonshire was around £36,431, which was albeit higher than the Scottish average of £30,040, which
Mr. Ferguson, you're now starting to give detailed evidence of which nobody has any notice, least of all me. So that, I'm sorry, that just isn't helpful.
Okay. Yep.
Can you perhaps recast? I remember your questioning, Ms. Gribben. Do you want to maybe see if you can put your question on the basis of some reasonable generalities rather than attempting to give evidence?
Yep. Ms. Gribben, if I wanted to purchase a property in Eastern Bartonshire 2 years ago, it would have cost me approximately 7 times my annual salary in order to do that. And that I would have to borrow 7 times my annual salary in order to live in Bearsden. Does that, again, just stating the types of scheme which you propose, shared equity, shared ownership, social rented housing, etc., does that seem particularly affordable, 7 times what you make in a year?
The 250,000 figure you quoted is the average across Eastern Bartonshire, so I would imagine that there's properties in Bearsden that are significantly at a lower price than that. But yes, property in Eastern Bartonshire is expensive. It's recognised that that's the case, and it is unaffordable to a lot of people if they want to buy private housing, or it can be.
Thank you for answering that. You talked about the SHIP earlier, is that correct? That the is that strategic housing investment plan, the way around saying that? I believe that's a document that's been submitted in evidence. It doesn't really come to mind exactly which one it is, but I'm sure we can find it if we need to clarify anything. But under the SHIP, the council's budgeted to invest 72.6.
I think if we can go to it, if we're going to be asked about it, I'd prefer that we actually go to the document, please.
Yes. What number are we?
So is that 40? EDC 40?
EDC 40.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so EDC 40, the strategic housing and investment plan, it's pretty clear, obviously, what the council's stance on local housing strategy and development is from this document. What I'd like to ask you, Ms. Cribben, is this document still relevant? Because to me, it seems it was produced in, the cover page says it was produced October 2018 for 2019 to 2024.
We actually update the SHIP annually, so there is a more recent version than that.
Yeah, and has that been submitted in evidence?
I'm not sure.
I think, am I right in thinking that the next SHIP has also been lodged?
I don't believe it has.
Sorry?
I don't believe so.
No, I knew there were two. So there's 39 was one, and so this is the latest one that's been lodged, but the previous one was also lodged. I knew there was two. Sorry, Ms. Gribben, you were saying, is there another version of this? Is there an update of the SHIP?
There's a 2020 version, yeah.
Well, the council hasn't actually lodged that. Mr. Ferguson, do you have any questions you want to ask?
Yeah, if I may, ma'am. So you're aware of the 2020 version, Ms. Gribben?
Yes.
Yeah. And are you familiar with the contents of that?
Generally, yeah.
Generally, yeah. So just in that 2020 version, which hasn't been lodged in evidence, but I'm sure could be submitted by Eastern Berkshire Council if necessary. It states that the council has budgeted to invest £72.6 million in new affordable housing over the lifetime.
You've got a copy, Mr. Ferguson, is that right?
It's actually on the council's. It's on the website. If you went to the Eastern Berkshire Council's website.
Yeah, I know that's unfortunately not helpful to me.
Oh.
So, are you about to quote from it, Mr. Ferguson?
Just that information, ma'am, not the document itself.
Well, if you want to quote from it, it rather suggests that you wish me to have regard to it.
Yeah, in that it is up to date and information especially relating particularly to the financial detail of this proposed development. It is materially important and must be considered, but could not have been considered at the time that we were asked to submit our objections because it did not exist.
Yeah, well, if you want to refer to it, then you won't be objecting to it to becoming a production.
No, ma'am. No.
Yeah. Ms Hamilton, could you arrange for your clients to put the 2020 ship into the productions? So I will see it. I will have an opportunity to see it. Could we perhaps work with, is the structure of the latest ship, is it of a similar structure to the one that we're looking at now?
No, it's quite different.
It's quite different?
Yes. We revised the structure, and it was actually because of the Scottish Government advised us to make the 2020 ship shorter in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we followed guidance from the Scottish Government. Right.
Well, I think what we'll do, Mr Ferguson, could we maybe see how you get on putting questions? Could you avoid it being too detailed? Once the document is produced, let me put it this way. If when you come to do your closing submissions you wish to make observations based on that document, you and the other objectors, I will exercise a bit of latitude. But if you have questions about the latest ship, the 2020 ship, could you carry on with those and we'll see how we get on?
Certainly will, yep. So, essentially, in the new ship, without going into too much detail, there is, as has already been accounted for by Mr Brodie in document EDC 43, almost foreshadowing, I suppose, what's actually happened, a significant amount of prudential borrowing against the HRA, that's the Housing Revenue Accounts 30-year business plan. What I'd really like to ask you, Ms Gribben, is do you think it would be, I'd just like to word this properly, speculative for the council to develop a particular development which they may not have the funds on hand to do in their existing capital structure?
Sorry, Mr Ferguson, that was definitely a question for Mr Brodie. And he was asked about that and he gave his answer. Ms Gribben does not carry the responsibilities that you're asking her to express an opinion on.
Okay,
so I'm afraid I'll have to disallow that.
Yeah, no problem. Ms Gribben, are you aware of the Affordable Housing Investment Plan of the Council?
Yes.
Yeah, AHIP. So, under the AHIP, do you know...
I think similarly, that's... Mr Ferguson hasn't lodged that document if he's wanting to refer to it.
This is the Affordable Housing Investment Plan. The Council hasn't lodged it. What's it? It's the Affordable Housing Investment Plan. What is it that is doing that on the ship? I mean, apart from the title, I mean, what's that? How are they applied together? The Affordable Housing Investment Plan.
The ship sets out the provision of affordable housing in Eastern Bartonshire. The AHIP really sets out the budget. I would say Ian would have been better placed to explain the AHIP.
Mr Ferguson, do you want to refer to the Affordable Housing Investment Plan?
I did, ma'am. I'm happy to move on if that's not possible.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, I would have hoped that everybody would have thought very, very carefully and got things in on time, particularly given they've had all these months. But it is, of course, the case that there may have been later documents produced in the interim that should be brought to my attention. Are you asking me to have regard to this document, Mr Ferguson?
Yeah, I am, ma'am, and the reason for it is I find it slightly concerning, to be perfectly honest, that the council, during this process, being completely aware of the legal implications of the process with both their own in-house solicitors and external,
that's neither here nor there.
that they've not submitted these documents.
Stay on the question I'm asking you. Do you consider that I need to have regard to the Affordable Housing Investment Plan?
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you say that?
In doing so, it would give context to the amount of affordable housing which has been developed within Eastern Bartonshire.
And what point would you wish to derive from that?
That there already exists sufficient affordable housing within Eastern Bartonshire.
Well, I have to say, Mr. Ferguson, if that is the point you're driving at, that's not a point you've previously made. I mean, and remember, I'm familiar with the various submissions you've made, and I remember that the key point is you can't pull any rabbits out of hats. You need to have told me in advance and the council in advance for their part what you're going to argue. And if you're going to produce an argument now at this rather late stage with Ms Gribben, when you had Mr Brodie, that the council's actually got enough affordable housing, that is it's an entirely new chapter, and it would have required notice, and it would have required the council would have required opportunities to respond to it. And your two witnesses, the witness who would have been in position to answer that question, has already given his evidence. Now, can you see? I mean, are you now wishing to introduce an argument that Eastern Bartonshire Council has in fact got enough affordable housing provision?
Ma'am, I've already submitted this argument. In one of my submissions, I talked about the local development plan, and I submitted a copy.
No, you haven't, Mr. Ferguson.
I have, ma'am.
I'm very well aware of your material. If you want to tell me where it is, and that does not include the chapters of evidence that you've introduced about alternative sites, which we have examined. You're now talking about provision. You're talking about the degree to which the council has successfully met need, if I understand you correctly. That you haven't said.
So in a document that I submitted, and I'd need time to identify exactly which document it was.
Right, well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. It's now just before 11 o'clock. What we're going to do is have a 10-minute recess till about 11 to allow you to muster your thoughts and find the places that you wish to refer me to in the various submissions that you've made. And we'll hear you then, and I'll decide where we go from there. So we're having a recess until 11:05.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Statements of case and other submissions, you had made an objection point to the effect that the council had met the need for affordable housing in their area.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to explain that now. So in a letter, which is my statement of case, sent 5th of October 2020 to Jane.
5th of October?
5th of October.
That would be the one submitted on the 7th of October.
Yes, presumably, ma'am.
Yeah, right, just so I know where it is. So that's 7th of October. Let me see if I can find it. Yep, got it.
So that is my statement of case, and in it, the part to which I'm referring states in the section financial, so it's broken down into 3 sections.
Section headed financial.
Headed financial, and in paragraph 2 of that section, ma'am.
So, a minute, remind myself of how you put it. Right, so it's paragraph 2.
Yeah, and just to clarify, would I be able to read just off of that? So it says in LDP2.pdf, which is the Local Development Plan 2 produced by Eastern Bartonshire Council, shows that the current CPO is listed as a potential redevelopment site reference S360, at Nithsdale Crescent on page 33. However, on the same page, EDC's own general comments state explicitly that there is already too much housing within the area.
I cannot make any part of this paragraph suggest to me that you are saying that the council has met affordable housing need. That is not said in that paragraph. The paragraph you've alluded to, in my interpretation, is dealing with the general housing need as addressed in the local plan. That's nothing to do with affordable housing. And you're not specifically saying, as you would have needed to do, that the council has met affordable housing need.
Okay, ma'am.
Anywhere else?
No, thank you, ma'am.
Nowhere else in your... So you're acknowledging that I am correct. This is not a point you have previously made.
Insofar as it relates specifically to affordable housing, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, is it a point that you now wish to pursue?
On the basis of the content of the AHIP, which we do not have with us, yes, ma'am.
Well, Ms Hamilton, do you have any observations to make?
Well, my observations, ma'am, would be that this isn't a point that's foreshadowed within Mr Ferguson's paperwork. It is not a matter that the council has had prior notice of, or that we have come along to this inquiry prepared to address. We've not had the opportunity to address it in our precognitions. I acknowledge that the AHIP is not lodged, but it's Mr Ferguson who's wanting to refer to it, and he has had the same opportunity to lodge documents as others have had. I think we would be prejudiced if this point is allowed to go forward.
Well, the question for me, of course, is do ministers need to know about this? And I have a concern if there is up-to-date information on the degree to which East Bartonshire Council has been able to address affordable housing, then however late it's introduced, remembering always these are lay people. I mean, one cannot realistically have the same expectations of them as you would have of professionals. It seems to me the only thing I can do with this, I think I should defer my final decision on whether or not it's admissible, but I think all we can do with this is go to written submissions on it. I think to adjourn the inquiry on this point, I suspect, would not be worthwhile, but I think written submissions on it may be the best way forward. Do you have a view on that?
Certainly, it could be addressed in written submissions if it's a point that requires to be covered, and I take the point you make on that. I suppose the matter of concern is just the timing of those, because obviously that will take a bit of input, and it may have a knock-on implication for closing submissions overall. So I suppose my concern being just that sufficient time is allowed for that to be pulled together.
Yeah, if I do decide to allow the point in and do decide to go on to written submissions, believe you me, the timetable would be tight for both parties. I think that I will reflect on this a little. I think what I'd like to do is ask the council to provide me with a copy, because you will have best access to it, of the latest of the Affordable Housing Investment Plan, as I understand it to be called. All right, Mr Ferguson, I get the council to give me a copy.
Yes, ma'am.
In order that I may have a look at it before I decide on whether or not the point should come in. Just to be clear, Mr Ferguson, is it your position that I should have regard to this document?
Yes, ma'am. I believe the content of the document presents material evidence of a significant amount of construction of affordable housing in the area, and recently, and more recently than the evidence which has been submitted, and therefore it paints a different picture of the current situation, which would better inform decision making.
Could Mr Ferguson perhaps give some notice of the particular section? Obviously we'll make the whole document available, but it would be helpful if he has a particular part of the document in mind to let us know what that is now.
I think that's a fair request. Which sections of the document do you envisage as being relevant? Can you tell me that?
Without having it in front of me, ma'am, I can't say specifically, but generally those sections of the document which make numerical reference to the number of affordable properties that have been constructed in East Barnshire Council in the past 2 years.
Well, right. Well, if you could arrange for me to have a copy, and it sounds as if you'd better get a copy from Mr Ferguson, because he clearly hasn't got the whole document. Are we talking about a large document, Mr Ferguson? Do you know how big it is?
Not off the top of my head, ma'am.
Even in terms of how much space it, if you've looked at it electronically, does it look like a large document?
Can I just clarify, actually, that the AHIP that you're talking about really isn't a document in its own right, but it's what it is, it's the Council's own investment programme, which forms part of the SHIP. So the way that we reference that is through our budget setting procedure to Council each year.
I knew I shouldn't have let you speak, Mr Brody.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
This is growing arms and it is growing legs, and I don't like that, and I definitely don't like it on the third day of the inquiry. I think we may have been at cross purposes. It's exactly what you're referring to. Where did you find the document you're referring to, Mr Ferguson?
Ma'am, the document in question is on the Council's website.
It's on the Council's website, and it's on the Council's website called Affordable Housing Investment Plan.
That's what it's referred to as, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, don't intervene at the moment, Mr Brody. I think that it's clear that this can't be dealt with superficially. That's clear. But I'm a bit concerned about as it is up-to-date information on the level of performance of the Council of Affordable Housing. My first reaction is ministers should be informed about the position on this. So I think that what I'll do is defer a final decision on it until I can see the document that Mr Ferguson is seeing on the Council website. So if that could be made available to me. It could be made available to me by the expedient of being emailed to Ms Walker, and she'll be able to email it to me.
Well, I wonder if, as a first point, given the difficulty we have is, and as you've heard from Mr Brody, there may be different things that might constitute such a plan. It's Mr Ferguson who's referring to this document, which he has found. Perhaps he could send me a link of the document that he has in mind, because then I will know that whatever we are looking at is the same thing that he is concerned with.
Replete though that is with electronics, it's a very sensible suggestion. Could you send Ms Hamilton a link to the part on the Council web page where you found the document that you wish to refer to? Could you do that?
Yes, ma'am, but in the interest of expediency, I believe it would be more appropriate for Mr Brody, who's just told us he knows where the document in question is and what it is.
Believe you me, Mr Ferguson,
to provide it.
I have to approach this in a fairly disciplined, stage-by-stage manner, and I'm not bringing Mr Brody back. I have reservations about this, and I'm not making an off-the-cuff decision on it, but I do not wish it to grow any more arms and legs. So, as I say, would you please identify the document from which you derived the information on which you were going to base this line of questioning? And would you send the link to that document on the Council website over to Ms Hamilton?
Yes, ma'am.
And once you've done that, we'll take it from there. You can have a word with Ms Hamilton about, the best way to do this. And then after you've mutually identified exactly what document we're talking about, you bring that to me, and I'll move to the next stage. Okay? Now, I think it might be helpful, and I don't want to let the point get away. Ms Gribben appears to be in a good position to tell us, from her point of view, give us a kind of overview on how the council's doing about the delivery of affordable housing. Now, I would be prepared to hear Ms Gribben's views as an officer on that, insofar and to the extent that she's able to answer it. Would that be helpful to you, Ms Ferguson, if I were to allow that?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay, Ms Gribben, so I'll ask the question. You heard all that. Mr Ferguson is wanting to argue and evidence that the council is in fact making good progress with the provision of affordable housing. And he's wanting to refer to the Affordable Housing Investment Plan in relation to that. But purely on the speaking from your own point of view, as it's your field, how much progress do you consider the council's been able to make about the provision of affordable housing?
Well, in the last couple of years, yeah, there has been quite a high provision compared to previous years. So I would say last year there was 54 properties built, new council affordable housing across Eastern Bartonshire. Within Bearsden, there were 27 units at Kilmerdinny. There's going to be, oh, so this is now, well, that was, sorry, the previous year. This,
so that was 2019 or 2020?
2020.
2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Bearsden?
Yes, there's 27 units in Bearsden. Currently, largely within Kirkintilloch, we have quite a significant new build provision. And there's a development site at Tom Johnson House where there'll be 87 units. That should be complete by February 22. There's a further 38 units in Kirkintilloch at Kerr Street, and a further 9 at smaller development sites again in Kirkintilloch. I would say, though, within the Bearsden area, it is limited. It's more within the Strathkelvin area where the new build provision is currently happening.
The schemes that you've mentioned, are these comparable? Are these the kind of schemes where, do any, oh no, let me just shorten that a bit. In these schemes, do any of these schemes have shared equity elements?
The Tom Johnson House development, we expect there to be 7 shared equity units. There is a further development at Kilmerdinny. We're working with a developer where we just actually this week will be receiving 9 shared equity units from them as part of our affordable housing policy.
Right. Okay, Mr Ferguson, do you have any follow-up questions to those answers?
No, ma'am. I believe that's generally accurate, and that's the understanding of it that I took away in consideration of the Affordable Housing Investment Plan as well. Yeah, if I may. Ms Gribben, are you aware of any further feasibility studies that have taken place since the feasibility study that was undertaken on Nithsdale Crescent that have identified any potential additional sites which could go on to inform the LDP2 process?
Yes, we've recently carried out a feasibility study on some future sites.
So yeah, so
which will be within the new local development plan.
Yeah. So there would be alternative sites to the Nithsdale Crescent site for development?
No, they're not alternative sites, no. They're additional sites to meet housing need within Eastern Bartonshire.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I have any further questions for Ms Gribben.
Right. Ms McMillan, it's your turn.
Brought the wrong glasses.
Questions for Ms Gribben.
Okay. Morning, Miss Gribben. My first question is, can you hear me all right? Yeah. Am I correct in saying that Grant Davison was your senior and he got Gillian McNamara's job when she left?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right? Right, okay. You said yesterday to Mrs Ferguson that Grant Davison was contacted by me first. Is that correct?
That was my understanding, that you had
That I had contacted him first?
that
Yeah.
there was correspondence in relation to valuations, and I had the understanding that you had made first contact.
Fair enough, okay. Right. Were you then aware that I had sent 3 important relevant letters to Mr Davidson regarding proposals and objections, and he categorically denied receiving them? Were you aware of that? Because it was quite a big thing at the time because I was real upset he hadn't received the first one, so I had to rewrite it because I hadn't photocopied it and he didn't receive that either, so to do it all over again. My point here is, I'm wondering if you knew about it because I had sent important documentation that I had regarding the old tenants association that all the tenants in the whole building had made because of the lack of repairs that the ADC were providing. So I'd sent them all the documentation, and I was really, really upset and angry with myself because I hadn't taken a copy of it. I just thought, because I did actually send it, believe it or not, registered post, so I don't see how you couldn't have. Are you aware of that time?
No,
No,
I've got
you're not, no.
no knowledge of that, no.
No. So they mysteriously disappeared, and it was really important documentation. I did actually, when I was speaking to Mr Brodie at the time when we had words together, that I had all this documentation. So I'm just glad that I never sent it all, and I kept, most of it. Anyway, now, yeah. Also, I wanted to know, were you in the office when Grant Davison phoned my house on various occasions trying to secure an agreement regarding the purchase of the properties from myself and my daughter, Miss Fullerton?
I knew there was correspondence and you had spoken on the phone, but
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of the number of times or the detailed content of those conversations.
All right, so maybe you can't answer this next question, and I'll explain it. This is my most important question. I'd explained my concerns to Mr Davison that I needed enough monies to buy equivalent 3-bed property in the Bearsden area. That was my whole point, as in same to same. So as not to lose my livelihood with regards to the rental income that I received. Now, my next question to you is, did you know that he suggested to me that I buy a 3-bedroomed house in Drumchapel?
No.
No.
No, I wasn't.
Now, for anyone, particularly yourself, ma'am, who doesn't know Drumchapel, it's a housing scheme. It's full of junkies, alcoholics, and there's police arrests all the time. I dare say there's decent people that live there, but he suggested that I buy a 3-bedroomed house with the money
Ms
that
McMillan, it's just to say to you, I do know about Drumchapel.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Right, okay.
I'm not a stranger to Drumchapel.
All right.
So,
right.
I'll leave that. You can take that degree of knowledge
So you know,
on my part
yeah.
for granted. Yes.
Well,
but carry on saying what you want to say about it.
Yeah, So, yeah. I was actually brought up in Drumchapel, to be quite honest with you, but that was a lot of years ago, and it was a really nice, decent place to live then, but now it's just the pits of the earth. Anyway, my last question is, you probably won't answer this, and I'm probably not even allowed to ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Was Grant Davison sacked?
No, he's in Australia.
I know he's in Australia, I know, but was he sacked?
No.
No. Oh.
No.
Okay, thanks very much. No more questions.
Ready to go? Would you like a minute or two?
I'll just get a glass of water if I may.
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah, I'll just get a glass of water if I may.
I don't know why they're laughing.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, Ms. Scriven. I'd like, before I start on the questions that I thought I had, to get some clarification on something that you raised in answer to Mr. Ferguson's questions earlier, and it was about the shared equity scheme. I've made a note that you said in answer that, that it gives the buyer the opportunity to buy the property for a discounted rate. Could you just explain that to me, exactly what you meant by that?
So a shared equity owner can purchase a property for generally between 60% and 80% of the valuation. So, for example, if the property is valued at 100,000, they can buy the property for between 60 and 80. In some circumstances, we reduce the equity share to 51%. So that would be 51,000 for a £100,000 property. So it's usually to try and help people to move on to the property ladder, or help people with a specific housing need to access privately owned housing.
So it's still a little contradictory for me. Are you not saying there that it gives the buyer the opportunity to buy a proportion of the property?
Yes.
Or you suggest
generally between 51% and 80%, an owner can purchase a percentage stake to those levels.
So the value isn't being discounted; it's rather the proportion of the whole that's being offered, isn't it?
Yes, but the reason being to make the properties affordable, because the purchase price is discounted. So
I don't see that. Can you explain to me how it's discounted when, in fact, it's a smaller thing that's being offered at a proportionate rate? It's not a discount, is it?
I don't answer that, Mr. Farrell. I quite understand that you may have questions about the private equity scheme in detail, but it sounds to me as if you're leading me into an examination of the merits of the shared equity scheme, whereas, as we know, it's a widely used mechanism throughout the UK, indeed not just in Scotland, and I don't think I'd want to find myself listening to evidence that amounted to a critique.
No, madam. That wasn't where I was coming from. It was a suggestion that the rate was discounted, because I didn't think it was discounted, and how it plays into the offer that's been made of the shared equity, because the offer that has been made, as I understand it, on the full value of the off-paper valuation, not a discount of that, which would have helped. If it was to be made as a proportion of a discounted value, that would have been great, but I don't think that's what was intended. I'm afraid
that the path that you're on would clearly lead me into taking evidence about the negotiations between yourself and the council. And, if you have questions about the content of the offer, this is not the place to discuss them.
I understand that, Ma'am, and I don't have any question about the values that have been introduced. It's about the process of the offer, the principle of it, not the specifics of it.
Well, that would take us back into the proposition that, you know, you're going to engage in a critique of the merits of the shared equity approach. I mean, you seem to me to be saying that it would not be satisfactory to you, and then that from there you seem to be wanting to tell me why.
No, ma'am, I don't believe that's my position. My position was closed and well understood by myself until Ms Gribben gave evidence that perhaps the discounted value should have been used rather than the off-plan value which has been used in determining an offer. I wonder if there's maybe been a mistake made when the offer was made of the shared equity value because a discounted rate wasn't applied.
That's us in the negotiations. That's you asking me to take views on the offer, and as I have made clear, that's not within the scope of this examination.
Thank you, ma'am.
If you do have concerns about that, there's no reason why you shouldn't resume your dialogue with the council to get it clear in your own mind exactly what's on offer, and if you identify that, if you suspect there has been an error or a wrong approach, well, you can take it up directly with the council, but this is not the place.
Thank you. I have tried to engage with the council, and I've been told...
Yeah, yeah, maybe the case, but there's no point in telling me about that.
Well, I've been told I may not engage with the council at this time until the CPOs are judged.
Well, it may be the case that the council, as I say, it always takes two to tango, Mr Farrell, and it may be the case that the council considers that they don't expect there would to be progress made with you. Doesn't matter. I'm afraid I can't engage with that.
I understand. Thank you. Ms Gribben, I think in your recognition it says that you came to the case early in 2018. Do you remember approximately when in 2018 that was?
It was the first quarter of 2018. It's stated in our file March 2018.
Thank you. So what was your... Can you remember, can you give us some idea of what your initial briefing, what the scope of the project was at that point?
At that point, myself and Jill McNamara visited the owners in Mrs McMillan's property, really to give an overview of the, or to advise that the feasibility study had been carried out, advise owners of the 4 options which were discussed. We did indicate that our preferred option was option 4, the demolition.
That's not the question I asked. What I'm trying to understand is, when you came to the project, what was briefed to you? What was your understanding of the status of the project at the time you joined it, please?
It was that the feasibility study had just been undertaken. As I said, our preferred option was option 4, and the brief at that time was to meet with owners to discuss the options, advise of our preferred option, and try to open up negotiations about potentially purchasing the properties.
I'd suggest that's disingenuous somewhat, because at that first meeting you didn't have a preferred option, and you were at that meeting. So at that meeting there was no preferred option 4. There were 4 options. So,
sorry, which meeting do you mean, Mr.
The initial meeting held at Ms McMillan's property.
The initial meeting at Ms McMillan's property, and sorry, do you have the date handy there?
I do. I'm just trying to refer to my minutes, which I submitted, but I don't...
Had any documents, supporting documents submitted by Mr Farrell?
The DPA has not had any documents from you at any time other than your statement of case. There has been no documents submitted from you. Are you talking about the council's papers?
No, I noted at that initial meeting that nobody was taking minutes, so I took my own copious notes and published my own minutes and asked for comment on those minutes.
Well, I have not. You don't. And am I right in thinking that you have not submitted these in support of your case?
emailed them to Ms Robertson at the time.
I don't believe that. I'm sorry, Mr Farrell. I don't think that's the case. Ms Robertson, that's the case officer, Ms Robertson?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, no such document has been received by the DPEA. And if you remember, we've written to you really quite a lot of times telling you that we have no documents and that you are required to submit these. And I even carried out a case review, which is the most exceptional course of action during 2020, during 2021, I should say, when we're going to reactivate the case. There's definitely no supporting documents from you.
In which case, may I submit it now?
Well, why did you not submit it earlier?
I thought I had the most involvement throughout this process with any member from any party has been with Jane Robertson, and she and I have discussed many times early in the process because I would ask her for advice, and she gave me lots of advice and send this in, do this, do that thing, and I sent it in to her. I sent it in from a client's from my client's computer system where I was working at the time down in Bracknell in Berkshire. I assumed it therefore would.
Well, Mr Farrell, things can go wrong when things are submitted by email. There are firewalls, there are junk folders, and I would be more sort of forgiving to all of that, were it not the case that I have written to you, or my office has written to you, I should say, but at my instance, all these times telling you that we don't have documents from you. So you've had a number of emails from us saying that there are gaps in your case and saying that that nothing's been submitted. And to this we have never had responses.
In which case, I'd like just to refer to it for my own personal memory of the events that have happened.
Now, the line of questioning that you want to pursue with Ms Gribben, if I understand it correctly, and I've only heard a bit of it so far, you seem to be saying that Ms Gribben is perhaps inaccurate in her recollection as to what she was first tasked to do. Is that right?
Yes, she was involved certainly before the option was made. The option was selected, rather. And I was just trying to establish what her background knowledge was of the project at the time that she came to it, based on the briefing that she would have received from her supervisors.
Remembering always that the case I'm expecting from you is the one that you have laid out in your statement of case. What is the point that you wish to make? What is the point you're wishing to evidence?
I'm of the view that the preferred option 4 has been the preferred option 4 since longer than's been suggested, and perhaps since as early as 2006.
Since 2006?
I believe that probably from 2005 it's been the intention to demolish Block 1 and Block 2.
I don't think you've said that in your statement of case. Have you got it handy?
It became apparent in evidence that Mr. Brodie gave in this hearing.
Apart from the fact that is a matter for me, I don't think that's actually been established in Mr. Brodie's evidence as such. It's my recollection.
It's an inference from from Mr. Brodie explaining that the...
Well, you didn't put it to Mr. Brodie. An inference. If there was an inference to be drawn from Mr. Brodie, it should have been put to Mr. Brodie when he was giving evidence.
It was in the examination of Mr. Brodie that you undertook yourself after I'd given the questions, ma'am.
Not well. That means I should really have remembered it, And I certainly don't remember a discussion with Mr Brodie about when the council became first interested. In 2006 has not been suggested, and I certainly didn't suggest it.
Ma'am, it was in relation to...
What I'm trying to explore is a way in which you can get some evidence from Ms Gribben on this point. So shall we just wrap it up? Let's put it... Is Ms Gribben, are you in any position to shed any light on whether the council had earlier plans to demolish the Nithsdale Crescent building, block 2?
No, not to my knowledge.
Not that you've heard?
No.
Ms Gribben, were you aware that there were 3 buildings of identical, it's been described as identical construction?
Yeah, I'm aware there were 3 buildings, yeah.
And are you aware that the first built at Dryborough Road, I think it is, received a pitched roof in or after 2005?
I don't know the date, but yeah, I'm aware that that building did receive work, yeah.
Are you aware that that was one of 3 subject properties that were on the planning application to install pitched roofs?
I don't really know. No, I don't really know that side of things.
Ma'am, Mr Miller speaks to this matter in his recognition, and I'm wondering if these questions are perhaps better addressed to him, given they're not really part of Ms Gribben's remit.
I think the reality is Ms Gribben was late on the scene from the point of view of the matter which is before me, as opposed to the longer history. And we know from Mr Miller's recognition, and he's to give evidence tomorrow, that his involvement has been longer. I think Ms Hamilton makes a good point. I think we may, I don't know, but we may get better evidence on this from Mr Miller just because he's known the building for longer.
I understand, ma'am, which is precisely why I'm trying to establish what the briefing was that Ms Gribben received when she came to the project in 2018.
You see, I'm not saying this is completely irrelevant, but it isn't particularly helpful because the deep history of this is of limited relevance. The council decided what it wanted to do whenever it did and has made its case now. And how it got to this point is less relevant than whether the decision stands up. Do you see where I'm coming from on this? The council may well have had ideas in the past about how they should handle any problems with these 3 buildings, and they may well have not been able to decide on a course of action or fund a course of action. All of these things may have happened, but they're not particularly relevant to the course of action that they're now pursuing. Do you see how this is of limited helpfulness to me?
I do see, and I think, therefore, any suggestion that the feasibility study was a box-ticking exercise with inflated values of non-preferred options put forward as a means to promote an option that had been preferred since 2005 is not helpful too.
Well, it would have been open to you, and has been open to you, to ask the council about their financial projections, and you've done that. You've had that opportunity. It would also have been open to you to provide contrary evidence and contrary estimates, and that you have not done. So I have to work with what I've got.
I understand, ma'am. Thank you.
Could you think very carefully about whether you've got any useful questions for Ms Gribben?
Thank you. I'd like to ask questions which would help clear up the reference to the term that we've heard several times over the past couple of days, to strong-arm tactics. Ms Gribben, do you remember when that was first heard in the context of this project?
It's really through this process that I've gained an understanding that some owners felt there were strong arm tactics rather than directly from yourselves.
So those were Ms McNamara's words, and they were in response to a question by me at that initial meeting. That at that initial meeting, it was explained by, I believe it was Ms McNamara who presented at the meeting, it may have been you, and excuse me if I've got that wrong, but it was put to us that you had in mind the redevelopment of the buildings where we currently live, and that four options were being, as you explained, four options were being considered, and further that you were going to move forward based on full agreement. You were seeking full agreement from all those affected parties on a way forward. I asked the question, what if we don't all agree on the way forward? Will there be a CPO? And it was Ms McNamara at that point who said, no, there'll be no CPO, there'll be no strong-arm tactics employed. So reference to strong-arm tactics that you defend in your recognition, where you explain, while you understand that the process of the CPO is distressing, and indeed it is, you alienate that position from the use of strong-arm tactics. So when that phraseology was introduced, it was by Ms McNamara in relation to a compulsory purchase of the property. Do you have recollection of that?
I remember at the initial meeting we spoke about the different options. Gillian, at that stage, it was very early discussions. There was no talk about CPO. Obviously, owners were concerned that might be how things would progress. But at that stage, we hoped to discuss the options, potentially buy the properties from owners, and obviously we managed to get valuations carried out at number 34 and 48.
Thank you. So are you now saying then at that meeting that you were party to, there was no preferred option?
It's my understanding that Gillian did intimate that the council were keen on the option to demolish and provide new build at the development. All owners were very clear that wasn't a preferred option. They were all keen on the refurbishment option, and that was made clear by owners.
So just to clarify, in my earlier question, when I asked at what point did you join the project, you explained that it had been decided that option 4 was to be progressed. We then had a meeting in which...
Sorry, no, it hadn't been decided. That was the council's preferred option. Obviously, it then went to council, who then decided that option 4 would progress. Our role was just to advise or meet with owners to let them know this study had been carried out, and that there would, and of the proposals and the various options and outputs of the feasibility study.
Now, the output of the feasibility study was that the complete redevelopment under council preferred option 4 had a costing associated with it of something over £3,048,000, I think it was, and that the refurbishment of both blocks had an associated value about 10% light of that value. Do you remember that?
I don't remember in detail.
What do you remember were the valuations of options at that time?
This is all valuation material, Mr. Farrell.
If I can recast,
many times I cannot include in my report and will not include in my report the nitty-gritty of the dialogue between yourself and the council on the negotiations.
May I recast the question? In the feasibility study, which we examined with Mr. Early, it became clear, and there were two submissions in EDC documentation, that the refurbishment option actually wasn't a single option. There were a number of ways in which option 1 could be fulfilled, with values from I think it was 635k or thereabouts up to £30 million or thereabouts. That was never presented, I don't believe. I believe that the compelling case for option 4 was made very much on the basis that it was only a little bit more than the refurbishment, and it also would attract the up to 27 times £59,000 investment for new build development from the Scottish Government. Do you believe that the presentation of the refurbishment option to include an all whistles and bells pricing was to skew the decision-making in favour of the preferred option 4, which is the Council's preferred option 4 before the feasibility study was undertaken.
Ms Gribben, don't answer that question. Sorry, Mr Farrell, it is clear that you've got concerns about the way in which that dialogue went forward, but the truth of the matter is that was negotiations, and you know where I stand on that. Furthermore, there is that point I've made earlier about the fact that we are where we are. The Council's case is before me. It doesn't really matter to me what was said earlier. Do you see where I am on this?
I do. It's the conduct, openness, transparency and good faith of the feasibility study which surely has a bearing, Madam.
Again, I have made it quite clear that if you have grievances about the Council, this is not the place for them. Now, I understand the difficulties of accepting it, but it is nonetheless the legal position. You can pursue them elsewhere, and ultimately, if it is the case that ministers decide to confirm this order, which is yet to be decided, if it is the case, then you will have an opportunity to raise these matters in the context of compensation, if you should find yourself in that position. That's where it happens. It doesn't happen here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions of Ms Gribben?
Yeah, can I just get a minute?
Sorry?
May I just have a second?
Yes, certainly. Certainly.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm finding this a very difficult process. Ms McNamara, you spoke in earlier evidence to engagement with the affected parties, and without touching on the subject of compensation and values, you did speak to the negotiation process. Is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
In earlier evidence, you've discussed the negotiation process and the engagement with the affected parties, and you talked to a series of meetings. The most pertinent one being the last engagement I had, which was the meeting. There's some ambiguity about whether it was Mrs. Ferguson's meeting or my meeting. It doesn't matter. We were both present. I was there. I assert that I was there as a witness for Mrs. Ferguson because she felt intimidated and asked me to attend. That's the meeting that I'd like to raise a couple of questions about. Do you remember that meeting?
Yeah.
Now, I can find it. I don't have it to hand just now.
It was the 31st of May 2019. It was the final meeting we had.
And then the meeting took place in May 2019?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, right, thanks.
Thank you. You may remember it differently, and it is a little cloudy now in the detail, but my recollection of the theme of that meeting was it was very much the Grant Davidson show. I don't think you had very much to say in that meeting at all, and I assume that's because Mr. Davidson led on the meeting, being, as we determined earlier, your supervisor. Is that correct?
He wasn't my supervisor, but he was most senior, and he was leading on that project.
Thank you. Apologies. I mean to cast no aspersions. Mr. Davidson, I'm in danger of being called out on this again, I think, because it's to do with the council's behaviour and performance. But at that meeting, he did introduce the value of £59,000, the grant money for the new build, and he said in so many words that the only way that this was going to go forward in any shape or form was if we took option 4, the development of the scheme, because that's the only way we're going to get this money from the Scottish Government. Is that a fair appraisal of what happened in that meeting?
I don't remember that conversation. We do receive Scottish Government grant for new build provision, which is slightly more than a refurbishment option, but I don't actually remember that conversation.
Do you remember Mr. Davidson explaining that the purpose of that grant money was for the build and subsequent maintenance of new build properties? No, because the 59,000 grant per property is to help contribute towards the new build provision. So I don't recall that. I don't understand why he would have said that. I agree. I don't understand now, knowing what's been explained to me, why he would have said that, but he did say it. But I understand you don't recall it, and thank you.
Can I just understand why you consider that to be important, Mr. Farrell? It's not actually obvious to me why that's important.
Because had any of the owners taken advantage of the shared equity scheme provided, then there was an implication that we would be assisted with the maintenance of that building, which is not true at all. And again, it seems it's not a point for this forum, but it does call into question the openness with which the negotiations have been handled.
But I mean, I can tidy the point, can't I, by the simple knowledge that things didn't go any further. Whether or not that was what was said to you, it still didn't persuade you.
That's correct, ma'am.
I don't think I need to know any more than that. And that's already more than I think I do need to know.
Thank you, ma'am. In regard of the process of negotiation, do you believe there has been one? I understand, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. I have nothing more.
Right, thank you, Mr. Farrell. So that's the end of Ms. Oh, no, what am I talking about? My questions. They've exhausted me, Mr. Farrell. Now, I don't know that I actually have very many questions, because we heard, I think, from you, Ms. Gribben, that you haven't known this property particularly well. So when you were working in the housing service, which areas did you look after?
I previously worked in housing policy rather than housing management, and then I recently moved over to housing development. So
you've not been in, you've not Or has it been some time since you were involved in actual frontline housing management? Or were you never involved in
I was
housing
never involved in housing management.
All right, okay. Now, it's been suggested, it arises, and I'm assuming you do know something about this, in the committee reports, in the Council's statement of case, and in other parts of the Council's case, there has been repeated reference to the proposition that the implementation of option 4 would result in the reduction of antisocial behaviour in the locality. So can I ask you this, what antisocial behaviour in the locality are we talking about here?
I can't speak for Nithsdale Crescent, but from speaking to housing management colleagues, sorry, this probably isn't relevant. It's more to do with housing type rather than area. I don't know if you want me to continue.
Well, I actually want to know about this location, this building, and the vicinity of this building.
Sorry, I don't have no more than what Ian had advised the other day.
Right, so you defer to the evidence of Mr. Brodie on that, which wasn't a great deal.
No.
Did the question of antisocial behaviour come up in your discussion with the objectors in these meetings that we've been talking about? Did antisocial behaviour come up as a topic?
Not particularly, from what I remember. That wasn't one of the sort of main points. Possibly in the passing, where it's a good 3 years ago. So, but I don't really recall it being discussed in any significant detail.
Your understanding of the project, well, did you hear the evidence of Mr. Earley, the architect from Coulthart Earley?
Some of it.
Yeah. Now, I'm assuming that in your role as one of the team promoting the scheme, you will have fully informed yourself about the reasons for the scheme. I mean, that seems logical to me. If you're having a dialogue with owners, you're probably going to want to advocate for the scheme. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about the antisocial behaviour element? What was your initial understanding of the Council's objective? I mean, the Council has gone for an option that will entail redesigning much of the open space that currently exists. I mean, what was your understanding of how that would work? If someone had asked you, why are you doing this, what would you have said?
I would have said the scheme was more to meet housing need and demand. The redevelopment is more to meet housing need and demand. Tenemental flats aren't popular with tenants. They much prefer, and applicants, they much prefer cottage flat types and main door flats. Housing management also aren't keen on tenemental properties, and they do believe there's a relationship between higher amounts of antisocial behaviour within tenemental blocks rather than direct door access. That's partly to do with maybe kids playing in closes, people leaving things in closes. There's definitely more estate management issues with tenemental properties than houses and cottage flats, according to our housing management colleagues.
Bear with Ms. Gribbin a moment, please. I had some questions about the council's use of the Housing Acts, the powers in the Housing Acts. That's the Housing Act 1987 and the Housing Act 2006. Are you an appropriate officer to ask about the council's approach to that? Right. Right, no, I don't think I do have any further questions for you, Ms Gribben. Right, since I'm reorienting myself correctly in the process, it's now for you to re-examine Ms Gribben.
Ms Gribben, could I ask you to go to Council Document EDC 11?
Yeah, I've got it now.
And could I ask you to go to the last paragraph of that letter, please? And could you tell me what these figures relate to that we see there?
Sorry, where are you starting? The last paragraph?
So I should perhaps backtrack slightly. Can you tell us what this document is, please?
The second offer to purchase.
Can I ask you to go to the paragraph at the foot of that page, starting current estimates? Can you explain to us what that paragraph is relating to?
Do you mean that also the offer of £103,000?
Apologies, I think I've given you a wrong document number. If you could bear with me a moment.
All right.
So do you have document EDC 11? Is that the document you're looking at, Ms Gribben?
Yes, second offer to purchase, 42 Nithsdale Crescent.
Yes, and if I can ask you to go to the foot of that page, we see a paragraph starting current estimates for the refurbishment of the flats. Do you see that?
No, I'm struggling. So the page starts with current estimates.
The first page of EDC 11, so EDC 11 is a letter.
Yes.
With Mr Grant Davidson on it. This one's addressed to Mr Farrell. Mr Farrell's name's misspelled. at the end of the first page, it says current estimate.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Current estimate, right. Got it?
Yes.
It's
sorry
perhaps
about
a printing issue, perhaps. I think so. If you have the paragraph starting current estimates, if you just explain to us what that paragraph is relating to, please.
It refers to the estimates of refurbishing the properties at Nithsdale Crescent, and indicates that the cost starts at £53,000, £53,500 per unit.
And what does the paragraph go on to tell us?
And obviously if there's further issues relating to damp or any other intrusive treatment, then the cost could rise to as much as £139,000 per unit.
So far as you're aware, Ms Gribben, in your discussions with the owners, did the owners accept or dispute these costs?
Yes. Mr Farrell particularly felt that the costs seemed high.
And do you remember any other reaction from the owners, from any of the other owners?
I believe all owners felt the costs seemed high.
And could I ask you to go to document EDC 15 now, please?
Okay.
And that is a letter addressed again to Mr Farrell, dated this time the 11th of April 2019. And could I ask you this time to look at the third paragraph, or paragraph which starts with refurbishment of the block. And do we see similar information within that paragraph?
Yeah, that's right.
And sticking with these letters, Ms Gribben, could I ask you now to go to document EDC 12?
Okay.
And this is a letter to Julie Ferguson dated the 18th of March 2019. Now, there's several pages to this letter. If I could ask you to go to the third paragraph of this letter, the third page of this letter.
Okay.
And if you could look at the fifth paragraph down on that third page, commencing before the new shared equity properties are made available, and could you read that paragraph out to us, please?
Before the new shared equity properties are made available, there will be an interim period to which you would require temporary accommodation. The Council is willing to discuss with you whether it can provide some support in the provision of this, for example, in providing a council property for the duration of the construction period. Alternatively, the Council would consider covering the costs of renting in the private market for the period of construction.
So what does that relate to?
That relates to offering resident owners accommodation during the construction period of any shared equity properties that are being built.
Thank you. And could I ask you now to go to document EDC 113? Which I believe is a timeline of events prepared by you. And do you have that document? Now, over onto the second page of that document, you have an entry relating to your meeting of 11th May 2018. And if I could ask you just to read out the content of the column on the right-hand side, which describes what took place at that meeting.
Gillian McNamara explained that PNCA wished to progress option 4 of the feasibility study. Again, they were asked to consider selling the properties to the council. Mr Farrell and Miss Ferguson were informed that potentially, following any purchase, that they may be offered a social rent. Both declined to offer and advised that they wished to remain owner-occupiers. Mrs Ferguson and Mr Farrell were also informed of purchasing a new build home on the site via shared equity, and again declined this option.
And can I ask, Ms Gribbin, when did you prepare this note? And how, on what basis did you prepare it?
Just really for a record of events. It's about 2 years old.
Thank you. Now, Ms Gribbin, you were asking questions about Mr Ferguson relating to house prices in the Bearsden area and surrounds, and I think you were quoted some information about average salaries, etc. within the area. Can I ask, is that something that you took account of in preparing your what has been termed the relocation strategy for owners within the block?
We're obviously aware of the high house prices in Eastern Bartonshire, particularly in Bearsden. That was why we were keen to promote shared equity within the area. Shared equity allows owners to purchase properties for significantly less than the market valuation of the properties.
Thank you. Now, Ms Gribbin, you gave some evidence to the inquiry this morning around the issue of demand in the Bearsden area or need and demand in the Bearsden area, referencing, I think, waiting lists and the situation with applicants in Bearsden. I think, have you noted as saying that you have a situation where the figure is about 37% in 2020, about a third of the applications that you receive are wanting to be located within the Bearsden area. You then went on later on in a passage of your evidence to talk to the situation with new builds coming forward, affordable new builds, which are either perhaps in the pipeline or have come forward recently. Now standing that passage of your evidence relating to those new builds, do you need to revisit your earlier evidence about need and demand, or does that remain good?
Well, I gave this provision of new build properties that have been developed in Eastern Bartonshire over the last couple of years. I would highlight that those new build properties are largely within the Strathkelvin area. There's limited supply within Bearsden and Mulgai, and that's partly due to lack of land.
Thank you. And I think one last question from me, Ms Gribbin. I think you've referred several times in your evidence to the point when you became involved in the project. I think you mentioned several times that option 4 was a preferred option at that point. Now, when you refer to when you make that reference to a preferred option, are you talking about a situation which was preferred by officers or preferred by council?
Based on the outcomes of the feasibility study, to officers, option 4 did seem the most preferable option, but ultimately the decision was made by council to progress with option 4 based on the evidence provided.
Thank you. I think nothing further from me, ma'am.
Thanks, Ms Hamilton. So I think that's where perhaps the end of Ms Gibbons' evidence. Yeah. And your next witness would be Mr Colin Miller. Mr Colin Miller isn't available today, but he's coming tomorrow. Right. That takes us to 12:20. And what I said about the order yesterday was that we would keep going and we would hear the evidence from each of the objectors after Ms Gribbin had finished. And I said that if anything arose from Mr Miller's evidence in which any of the objectors wanted to give additional evidence, I would look favourably on that. Put it that way. If there were good reasons for it. Remembering the strictures which I've repeatedly made about the council's conduct not being relevant. Now, would the objectors like to get started before we break for lunch, or would you like to break for lunch and come back at 1:30? What would you like to do? Would you like to get started?
Whatever you prefer, ma'am.
Well, ma'am, it feels like a good time to break for lunch if I might chip in my tuppence worth.
Right. Well, it's a civilised time to break for lunch, so that's what we'll do. So if everybody could be back at 1:30, and we'll start with Mrs Ferguson's evidence. Now, can I ask you again, is everybody quite happy that when we commence the evidence, Mrs Ferguson, we're going to go into private session and cease the webcast? Is everyone comfortable with that? Is that acceptable? You know, you don't have to, you know, if you wanted to be webcast, that would be fine, but you'd rather not. Right, okay. Well, that's the way in which we'll proceed then. Right, thanks, Ms Gribbin, that's great.